Yes, guys, how's it going? Josh here. Today we're going to run through a quick brand guidelines overview. So I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain exactly how we build the brand systems for our clients. We just finished this project, one of our amazing clients. So right now it is our most up-to-date brand system template that lives in Figma. Also, not really a template, it's pretty custom kind of mechanics behind with the live editable links. That's completely up to date and it's pretty cool. So I really want to show you behind the scenes here. This would be great if you're an actual company, you don't have any brand guidelines in place, you're struggling to keep things consistent, you don't know what colors to use, you don't know what tone of voice to use, the team's a bit stuck as to which logo to use when. This is really useful for you. Also, if you're just a designer and you want to learn some tips and tricks how to streamline your process, how to build an efficient brand guidelines document, save some time with some editable components and stuff in Figma, or if you're just curious how we build brands here at 3x3 and how I do the full brand process, it's a pretty cool project. So stay with me to the end and I'll show you the full nuts and bolts behind this process, right? So if you have a look at the top level here, this video is not going to be anything crazy edits or fancy production. So if you want big flashy stimulus, then you can watch a fast time lapse of Subway Surfers on YouTube Shorts, right? But if you actually want to stick with me here for 10 minutes and learn a little bit about building a brand, building a up-to-date atomic system or updatable system where things have components, etc. stick with. From the top level, we've broken this down into, so I'm not going to dive too much into the actual brand process here in terms of how we arrived at the logo, how we built the logo, how the strategy we did, the workshops we did, all of that. That's might be a separate video, but for right now I'm just going to focus on the brand guidelines. So to give you some context, the brand guidelines would come at the end of the project once we've already done all the process. We've built the logo, we've done workshops, we've had meetings, we've approved everything, we've approved the logo, we've done everything right, and this is basically just building that into the document and making those rules so we know don't do this, and basically setting in stone. Although I say that, it still gets updated at time, but bear with me. So we break this down into introduction, strategy, logo, color, typography, extended identity. Some people like to include the mockups here, but I like to include the actual logo mockups and application of the brand separately, which comes in the logo proposal or the brand identity proposal. But this document is used for internal reasons. So if you're handing this over to internal team or external contractors, they don't want to see the mockups every single time, right? So that's a separate document. From the top level, obviously these are, I might refer to some actually Figma tools and Figma jargon. So if you're a client, if you're not a potential client for me, you would be, but you're more business owner, then you can just pay attention to the actual theory, higher level stuff. We've got here, these all neatly labeled in sections: brand strategy, logo, color, typography, extended identity, right? Let me see where it would be best to start. We've got textiles here neatly laid out. I know some people don't like to layer the actual layers don't need to be that neatly laid out, but textiles is massively important right here. Then we've got all the colors. So these are the brand colors here, and you've got all the brand colors labeled with the correct color name, unique name to the brand, and then the corresponding hex code. So that means every single color, I'm not sure how much of a novice you are with design, every single color is the exact same code, right? So for example, we click on this steel blue, we'll see it's the steel blue component, right? Which is super powerful, because then if I want to change that blue, if you have a look, the entire document where all that blue is being used, let's say for example we make changes, right, and we say, you know what, this blue is it's too light, then we can just go like this, boom. And can you see how every single blue in the entire document gets updated, which is incredibly powerful to make changes if we have to, and just for me to build the brand from take a step back and I can see everything how it performs amongst the whole brand, right? So that's pretty powerful. For example, we have to take this iron gray, make it lighter. You can see where it's being used. It'll be updated live, which is really cool, right? Then we've also got the names, which is always nice. We give everyone custom names, so it's not just a blue, it'll be like steel blue, or it'll be Cordier white or something like that, which is quite fun. Okay, so then we've got, that's from a color perspective. Typography is also a variable. So we've got two typefaces, which will be primary and secondary. This is the primary one, overused grotesque and sans serif. And you'll see here, so we've got the colors all labeled here. So if I had to just type in a component as, let me just get a text here, And if you see here, this button here will be the variable, right? So apply variable, and then I can just choose steel blue from here. And then if I had to come in here and change this, let's say for example we suddenly want to change, we want to call it, I don't know what we want to call it, flamingo. No, let's not say flamingo blue. We want to call it like diamond blue. Then everywhere where that's been used will change, right? So that's pretty effective. That's pretty cool. That's a nice, neat trick. Let me just change that back. Okay, so that's pretty cool. A quick way to make these different categories is you just put in a / when you make a new variable. So I'd say variable color, whatever, and then I'd go / let's say that the folder I want to make is, then I'd say red or whatever, and then that would create its own folder category, right? Which is pretty cool and neat. I like to keep things neat. Like there's a balance between being creative and being neat and tidy, right? So another thing that's pretty sweet is if we had to look, let me show a good example. So yeah, for the typography, I'll probably jump the gun showing you the variables. I'll explain the actual anatomy behind the brand guidelines afterwards. And so if we, another sweet thing is, check this out. So we've got the primary and the secondary typeface, right? So this here has been linked, like if I show you here, we've got the primary and the secondary typeface, which is overused, grotesque, and source serif. So wherever that variable as primary variable has been used, it becomes overused, grotesque, right? So for example here, it would be primary, and here secondary. So if we had to change the secondary typeface to not source serif, maybe it was like inter, then can you see how every single piece of typography that's been used the secondary typeface that was source serif would be changed to inter, as you can see here. See how everything's changed? That was source serif. See? So that's really neat. So when I'm building out the assets, when I go to the portfolio, when I go to the logo proposal, any single document used within the brand building process from the beginning to the end, it's two typefaces, where if I had to change it, it automatically updates across every single document that we've gone back and forth with the client. So that's really neat, especially when it comes to building out assets. For this project, we had a Instagram feed, some social media stuff, and their portfolio. So you can see here, everything here, obviously the colors, and then another style is the, what did we say, the typography style. So here, this would be primary, and then if we were to, like I said, change the primary typeface, check this. So let's say we made this primary typeface basketball or something, right? It has to be typed out the exact typeface name though. But imagine we did that. You see how every single thing across the entire brand would update. So this is really powerful when you're building out the website, you're building out social media, you're building out portfolio, whatever the assets, whatever is included in the scope, right? So let's put that back. So that's really neat. So we've got color styles, type styles, and actual variables included here. So from an anatomy standpoint of an actual sort of theory behind what goes into a brand guides, I don't want to make this too long, but what we obviously got here, like I explained, we've got the general introduction where we just explain, now this is sort of custom. I say sort of intentionally because the general like variables used are generic, or not generic, that's easy to copy and paste in terms of the system, that it's primary, secondary typeface. But for each brand, we like to infuse a bit of their own look and feel throughout. So for example, Cordier is very rigid. The client asked for compact, timeless look and feel. So everything throughout the guidelines infuses that look and feel. When you flick through their guidelines, if you had to print it, it would almost be a coffee table book, or it would be like a proper guideline how to actually use the brand, not only written, but like how the brand's actually being used, right? So a good example here is like some brands would use beveled or rounded corners, but for example, Cordier, they use straight corners. That's just their whole brand. You'll see when the website comes out, everything's sharp corners. So that's an example of how we infuse the look and feel throughout the brand, even through the client documents in terms of the logo proposals, in terms of the final sign-off files. Everything will have the identity infused, which is not efficient from a operation standpoint, but it's that extra touch that I like to go to just deliver really high quality work for our clients, right? So we've got your entry page. The date doesn't have to be October, but we just had 2 versions because we did one before and after the logo. Then I'll say, welcome to your brand Bible, your roadmap and tour guide to everything Cordia. This guide will show you how to effectively and consistently use our brand identity so we look the best at all times. That can vary based on the tone of voice, but nothing too much. So these heading styles, in terms of the color blocks, are unique to Cordia. That's a look and feel that they use. That's a graphic element that we've strategically decided on. You'll see that throughout the whole brand. But these are still components. Obviously, we've got in the component section here that, see how complicated this is, but it's really neat. So yeah, these are all components that are specific to the brand, so we can just update those at any time. And then we've got the basic table of contents, which would be brand strategy, logo, color, typography, extended identity, right? Then we go straight into it with each chapter as a cover style and a table of contents. So we go into the brand strategy. This layout is not 100% the same for every single client, but sometimes we include more, sometimes we include less. Sometimes the splash screen, like we said, if it's a fun brand, this will be, obviously they have their own colors, it'll have their own patterns, it'll have their own type layout, the texture, etc. So the actual client we worked with was Cordier, where they've shifted from sort of an animation studio to a venture studio where they want to take on bigger work, land bigger clients. They want to show up as a little bit older than they were, and that's the reason why they rebranded to sign highest paying clients. So that's pretty cool. Inspire creative to grow their brands. That's their general why. This also will vary on the scope of the project. Was messaging included? Was verbal identity? How in depth did we have to go? How much strategy did we do, etc. So their mission: exceptional quality made to last, winning brands built to tell unique stories. Here's their brand values. So like I said, I'll make a separate video in terms of how we lay out the brand strategy, what are the different questions, pages, tools, workshops we use to get the strategy and how we present it, etc. But for right now, I'll just show you the end product, which is, I like to have 3 brand values. So 3 things that the brand describes the brand. Anything more than that is just not clear enough and confusing. Anything less than that is not actually, it's not really unique. So it's nice to get 3 magic words. I say magic like contrasting words, so we find a sweet spot of uncharted territory, right? Which is always fun. They've got tone of voice: informed, optimistic, assuring. So that's the brand strategy. The brand strategy is a nice place to infuse that visual identity, like I said, because it could just easily be a couple of sentences on a white background. But like I said, I like to just include the whole brand look and feel. So then we come into the logo. So I think I'm going to introduce, yeah, now's a good time. But you can see this, remember I showed you the typography pairing. That's the way this has been laid out, the same as the brand would, the same as they would on their social media, the same as they would on their website, etc. Right? So we go into the primary logo here. It's pretty beautiful, pretty amazing mark. We go into a quick explanation of how we got there. Sometimes this would be more extended, explaining the whole construction, but sometimes I like to just keep it short and sweet. So I don't like to give you a 60-page guidelines where you just need to know how to use it, when to use it. But sometimes we'll include the construction, how we got there, how we arrived there, but we do that separately with the client. Like I said, this is the final document that they use. So this is where I'm going to introduce, check the logo. So especially for this project, we did a sort of minimum viable brand guidelines, and then we did the logo separately. So we had version 1 and then a version 2. But basically all we did was, and especially when we had a few slight tweaks at the end there, we just wanted to check if we wanted to find a way to best approve the logo. So we've built, everything's built in these components, right? So this component has a variable where it'd be default mark, so standalone mark, and then it'd be the word mark. And this is a bit more custom, but it's the do's and do nots. But this logo will update throughout the entire brand guidelines, right? So I don't want to mess with it too much now, but if I had to say, let's just remove that, for example, right? Everything in the guidelines would be updated exactly like that change. You see that? So that's amazing for us to build these guidelines at speed and to be extremely consistent and high quality. See how everything's been updated there. So let's not mess that up too much, because this is, I think, still their live file. So this applies for everything throughout the brand. These are the layout styles that we've used across the heading styles and the paragraph styles across the document. Here we've got the color styles, like I mentioned earlier, the different codes, different components, different heading styles, different names. Here we've got the typography style. So like I said on the right here, H0, which also be known as display, but H0 down to H1, H2. Sometimes there's H2, H2.2. 2.2 would be the sans serif for the secondary typeface. 2 would be the primary typeface. And then it's nice to lay it out here. These big sized ones would be mostly on the typography as a nice splash screen. And then, like I said, you have the name variables. You have got the button components. These are a bit more specific to the actual social media. These are the actual page layouts, so running template, running headers as a template. So yeah, it's pretty, I mean, this is almost another level. Obviously the design is at extremely high quality and it's exactly how we planned it, but that's only the first step. The next step is to lay that out. So I have the vision as the person who built the brand. Now I need to make that in a way that you, I mean, as the client or as the person building the brand, that you can effectively build it on your end. The brand down in rules and say, use this, don't use this, explain that you can't use this color at this moment, you have to use this color in this position, so that every single combination, pairing, application of the brand is being thought out and intentional, and that it's to the highest quality possible, right? So guys, don't want to go into too much detail, but this will also vary based on the logo, but breathing room, so there'll be like different explanations that explain, keep a safe space. I like to actually export the PNG or SVG files with the white space already around it, so you don't have to manually measure it. So here we've got the colors, secondary colors, we've got the primary, nice, just clean to see the logo. We've got the actual pairings, how to and how not to use the colors. Here we've got some more rules. This is always a fun page explaining, don't stretch it, don't add a drop shadow, don't change the color, don't transform, all of this stuff. So this could actually respect the logo, please. that's just a short way of saying it, right? So if anything that has been, that everything that is not in here, don't try it unless you're professional, unless you're really good, right? But for the most part, just stick to what we say, right? Here I've got the primary color pairings, black and white, or charcoal black and paper white. These are, like I said, all live color variables, which is really sweet. So if we ever had to change this, it would change, like we said. Here I've got the secondary pairing, so there'll be an explanation here, do's and do nots. Don't use the blue on gray, don't use light gray on dark gray, etc. Like, here's a fun way of explaining it. Don't use button styles components with the wrong color, because there'll be a lack of contrast and lack of harmony throughout, lack of consistency. That's the ultimate goal of this brand guides, to keep things consistent, keep things at a high quality, so that I don't have to design every single thing, because I can design every single thing as extremely high quality, but I need to lay that out for you guys to use, right? So yeah, we've got to look at what colors to not use, what logos, when to use it, and how, so no one messes it up. Typography, here's, like I said, the display or the 0. Here's an explanation, just explaining how we arrived at the type. Sometimes this will be already approved in the identity sign off phase before, but it's nice to include a little bit explaining, if a designer had to pick this up, why we arrived at that typeface, what are the pros and cons almost of that typeface, when to use it, why to use it, how not to use it, everything down to the tracking. So the tracking would be the spacing between the letters, the leading would be the spacing between the sentences, everything explaining how to use it efficiently, right? Here's an example. But like I said, all of this is in the look and feel. It already has the same style throughout the brand. So it's nice to see already the brand behaving in the real world. Here's a bit more detailed look at the type hierarchy. So it'll be the primary font, the primary, secondary, different sizes, different weights, etc. Here I like to include, so you get typography pairings, which will be primary font versus secondary font, but then there's actually different ways of laying it out, different font styles. So a typeface is, for example, Inter, and that includes bold, semi-bold, medium, regular, light, thin, right? But the actual font, that means it's just Inter, semi-bold. That's one font, Inter, semi-bold. But a typeface includes the whole family of weights. So that's just a quick FYI. So I like to include two different pairing systems, which would be, we use as the display, as the primary typeface would be low caps. It would have this size, this lettering, this tracking. The secondary would have this highlight. Not every brand has this exact way. But then the second one would be in italics. It would be sans serif. For example, as a second way of using type, it would be all sans serif, and then would go for this component button style. And that's completely unique to this brand. Not all brands will be laid out in that fashion, right? So then we get to the last phase, which would be the extended identity. Now this phase varies, and this is the phase that updates and stays almost as maintenance as the brand builds. So remember, this is just the first phase that the brand will only enter the world after this, and then over time things change. You might hand it over to designers, web designers, and they build and extend. There might be more social media campaigns that we have to see what colors work, what do we change, what do we add, and this is normally where we added the extended visual identity. So that's everything: what photography do you use, what imagery do you use, what icons, illustrations, textures, etc. So I like to have a verbal, written explanation, how to use the style, the general feeling, the general essence of the brand. Here's another way of capturing that essence is through a mood board. This will also be used previous processes in the first or second phase, where we're trying to approve, sign off the identity and actually narrow down what direction we're taking the brand. But it's great to include this here because a designer can look from a top level and say, okay, I get the general essence of this brand, what direction we're taking it. For example, this brand, we must understand that not everything will be an exact rule, but the general way to use the brand should be understated, mature, sophisticated, rigid, minimal. Just so that, like I said, not everything's going to have, I can't write a rule for every single combination design decision out there. So here's just a general direction where to take the brand. Here's a nice overview. This will expand once we include website, but like I said earlier, depends on what's included in the scope. But it's nice to see how the brand looks from a top level, almost everything together as an overview. Here's an example of imagery. Like I said, different brands lean on different graphic elements. So for example, this brand, photography was a key component to their brand identity. So it's nice to explain that. For example, Crushed Blacks, it's this very contrasty, minimal saturation, minimal color look and feel. There we've got the landing page direction. This was a very rough direction because we were working very closely with the web team. So this is just a quick direction for them to take over and quickly hand over, and for them to start working on it. Like I said, when we do social media, that will all fall under this chapter, which we have actually done, which I can show you. And that, like I've said, it's obviously the live logos, the live color styles, text styles, etc. So here's a look at the social media from a top level, which is really neat and tidy. Like I said, timeless, professional. What else did we say? Mature, sophisticated. They really wanted this, what did they use? Compact and minimal, black and white. They really wanted to look a lot older than they are, which we achieved perfectly. And we've got this little serif font, just throwing that little creative flair, which is the same, speaks to their logo, is this mascot, the bird, the mockingbird, that is this timeless figure, but it has this creative flair to it. So that's another whole conversation, and I actually would love to release their case study soon, but you can see how this is performing. So, for example, like this, I'm going to just do a quick way of doing this, but we'd come in here and say, we extend the extended identity section, like I said, while the brand builds. So then this would be amazing. We'd say, when you go into social media, don't use this style. For example, social media, we use these grids. and that's always nice to explain. So we just go like this. Boom. I mean, I just actually want to do this for myself to see how great it's going to look. Then we'd go social media. I'd explain how the social media would look there. There could be different light to dark mode. I just want to do this because I know it's going to look really cool. And we go there. And then you can see how the brand's being used, right? And for example, so here's a look how it's actually built. These are all sections. We'll stick that in the section. That goes here, and then we've got these live running headers, right? So we'd go here, page template. At the top here, we'd go extended visual language. We change this to social media, and then you can see there, that's as quick as that. And I mean, that's taken many years. I've done loads of these guidelines before, over years, figured out what are the key essentials, because you have to get a simple guide. You don't want it to be 70 pages explaining the brand guidelines, but you still need to have the correct, which areas you minimize, which areas you kind of go in a little bit more detail. So that's a quick overshot how things would look. We'd export this in the PDF format so you can actually flick through it or print it, as well as hand over the actual Figma file, so you've got all the live components and brand system. So that was a really fun video for me in terms of just, giving you a raw look inside behind the curtain. Let me just try see what else I can show you. We've got the portfolio here, so I like to lay it out, the carousel we've got here, provided components, work in progress or offcuts, logo proposal. This wasn't actually, there was another separate one that was a lot more in depth, but this was the final phase where it was just explaining what we wanted to get, some reference examples, some mock-ups, different explanations, different mock-ups. Like I said, these mock-ups, so this, if you notice, this changed. The logo was a lot more vertical. But see, these mock-ups, I don't like to include them in the guidelines, like I said, because if you're handing that over to a web developer, for example, he doesn't want to see the behind the scenes. What else we got here? We got the assets that is all live, the web landing page, social media, print. Preview is always fun. This, however, isn't live, but it's an amazing way for me to hand it over to them after the project and say, hey, have a look here, have a look at how the brand guidelines turned out, or for me to obviously use in case studies, etc. This isn't live, so these are PNGs that I've exported, but it still looks pretty neat. And the sandbox, some people call it the graveyard or whatever, where all the design bits and bobs, cut-offs that have been used in the process to build the guidelines just die there. I was going to say live there, but they almost die there. So yeah, that was I wanted to have another video where I actually go into detail and explain how we built the brand. It was an amazing project. It was really fun that we arrived at this bird, or this mockingbird. I want to explain the strategy we went with. I want to actually, they're getting their website developed as we speak, so that'd be amazing to show you that as well. And from top level, I hope you found value in this. If you're really interested in actually getting this template, I'm looking at releasing it soon, but I'm still thinking about it because I've spent a lot of time building it, and it's quite unique to our process, right? But if you want to have a look, let me know, drop me a message or something somehow, and we could sort it out. If you're a brand in your business and you want brand guides like this, drop me a message. We can arrange something. It doesn't have to be a full rebrand. We can maybe just turn your existing brand with a slight refresh with this. If not, hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned. I'll be dropping the case study at least next, and then if not, stay well. We'll chat soon.